Well, I am excited to be here. Ever since I learned about this strategy, I've been presenting it out of my house with my wife as my partner. We've done it 4 or 5 different times, and it's been really fun to see how it changes people's lives, and I'm really excited to be doing that on a much larger scale tonight. So I'm the type of person who doesn't really like to just talk at a bunch of people I don't know, so I kind of wanted to get to know you guys a little bit. So I'm going to ask you guys some questions, and unfortunately I can't hear every one of your individual responses, so we're going to do this by raising of hands. How many of you own a house currently? Okay. How many of you, is this the first time you're ever hearing about mortgage acceleration strategy, or this particular mortgage acceleration strategy? Let's see. How many of you currently rent a place and are looking to buy a house soon? Excellent. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and get started. So today we are talking about mortgage acceleration. Mortgage acceleration is one of many steps to becoming completely financially independent, specifically to early retirement, as I call it. This presentation was made for kind of the groups of people that I usually present. Hopefully you guys have a sense of humor, because there's some places in here that have weird language in them. Okay, so let's talk about what you're supposed to do as a financially responsible adult, what I like to call responsible adulting. When we talk about finances, when you look at any kind of financial strategy out there, when you talk to financial gurus or listen to, what's that guy that's really angry about money all the time? Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey, that's the guy. Maybe he's not. I just remember him being on some show where he was angry at the time. I don't know. Anyway, when you listen to any of these guys, they'll tell you a lot of really cool strategies. There's a lot out there to learn, but you can kind of always boil it down to 3 basic points. 1, they're always telling you to save money. If you make $1,000 in a month, you shouldn't go spend $1,000 in a month. You should spend less than that. Oh, and you shouldn't spend more than that. That's important too. Spend less than what you make each month. So that's kind of one of the basic principles that they teach you to do, right? They also teach you to pay your mortgage off early. Now, depending on who you're talking to, you'll hear different ways to do this. How many of you have heard that if you make 2 payments that are each half of your actual mortgage payment each month, you'll pay off your mortgage faster? How many of you have ever heard of that before? It works. It's not a huge savings, but it could actually save you a year or 2 off your mortgage. So right there, you've already learned something today. Depending on who you're talking to, they'll teach you a slightly different strategy. Everyone has a little bit different. Obviously, putting more money into your mortgage pays it off faster, right? Making double actual payments kind of helps. But they want you to do that. And then 3, they want you to invest. Put your money in a 401k, buy some real estate, do something, put your money to work for you, because having it just sit there under your bed doesn't really do a whole lot for you. Money itself doesn't have value. It's what you can do with the money that gives it some value. So just having it sit there isn't really helpful. But let's talk about this. If you make $1,000 a month, and we're going to be using random generic numbers throughout this presentation. For some of you, the numbers I throw out may seem really low. For some of you, they may seem really high. And I want to speak about that for a second really quick here. I recently attended a presentation put on by one of the leaders in the company out in Chicago. And he talked a little bit about financial language and how we talk to each other. In the world, in society, there's kind of this idea that you don't really talk about your finances with other people, right? That's private, that's secret. You don't go and tell other people how much you make. You don't go and tell them how much your house is worth, or how much you owe on your house, or how much you spend each month. You usually only do that with really close friends or family, and usually only when it's necessary, right? How many of you would agree with that? How many of you don't like to talk about your finances? Okay, well, good. If all of you guys are open to talking about your finances, this is going to be so much easier. Okay. From my point of view, we should be more open about that. It's not a competition. We're not competing against each other. It doesn't matter if I make more or less than you. It doesn't matter if my house is worth more or less than yours. What really matters is that we're all finding a way to become financially free. We're all doing more with what we have. And that's kind of the environment that I want to set here tonight. There may be a time during the presentation, or even maybe later on after the presentation, if you want to talk to me individually, where we kind of start talking about individual numbers. I'll tell you some of mine probably during this presentation. My wife might have to correct me if I'm wrong, because my wife here in the front row, she knows our numbers. I don't. She's much.
It's way more than 20,000. That's been bugging me the whole
time.
Okay,
how much is it?
40 at
Okay, so we paid off $40,000 off our house in the last year. Sorry, my bad. I was playing it conservative. I don't actually follow our finances. She does. So I may be throwing out some of the numbers from my own personal thing. I am not doing that to either brag or shame myself, depending on your point of view. Like, I'm not trying to compare to you guys. I'm not trying to compete. If I ask you for your numbers, if you are comfortable with that, again, it's not to compete. It's not to any. So I just kind of want to set that. So we're just going to talk about, let's say you make $2,000 a month. See, I already changed my number. I said 1,000 before. If I make $2,000 a month, can I save $2,000 a month? Can I put $2,000 a month towards my mortgage? Can I invest $2,000 a month? Can I do all three of those at the same time?
Yes.
Ooh, trick question. So what we're going to be talking about here today is how you do all of these things simultaneously with the same amount of money, which is what makes this strategy so incredibly powerful. Normally, you would have to take, say you make $2,000 a month, and $1,000 of that goes towards your food, your car, your transportation, clothes, whatever you do in your life. You're left with $1,000, and you're trying to find out how to split it amongst these. You're like, oh, let's put $200 here. Let's put a $400 extra towards my mortgage, and that leaves me with $400 that I can invest with. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like just $400 doesn't ever seem like it's worth it to invest for me. I'm like, why bother? I could take that $400 and let's put it somewhere else instead. And kind of same thing with my savings. $200 in my savings, that's not going to change anything in the long run, is it? So what if I just put that towards here instead? You just kind of struggle, and you can never do any one of these strategies really well. And I'm going to prove it to you. We're going to talk about two different scenarios. Scenario one, and we're going to talk about these two different scenarios. I mentioned three things. We're going to talk about these first two. Scenario one, you save money. So again, back to the numbers. You make $2,000 a month, and $1,000 of that goes towards living expenses. That's what we're going to call it. From the rest of this class, if I mention living expenses to you, what I'm talking about is everything you need to spend each month to stay alive, not including your mortgage or rent. So this includes utilities, it includes food, it includes clothing, transportation, entertainment. It's okay. It's okay if you spend money to have fun. Not all of your money has to be just to stay alive, because that's not living. Okay, how much does that leave you with? Who's really good at math? Okay, so that leaves you with $1,000, right? So that $1,000, you decide that extra money you make each month, and some of you are going, wait, you're left with $1,000? That's really cool. And others are like, how do you only have $1,000 extra each month? So you take that $1,000 and you put it into your savings account every month, right? Because you're going to do that. You're going to do that one right. And that's good. And at the end of, a lot of time, one, you're protected against an emergency. If you lose your job 2 or 3 years down the road, you've got several $1,000s of emergency funds to live off of until you find a new job, right? Okay, but let's say nothing bad ever happens. I don't know about you guys, but I find that when I talk to people, a lot of people treat their savings account as sacred. You don't touch that for anything. It doesn't matter if you do lose your job. You don't touch your savings account. People don't ever use that savings account for anything. It just sits there because they've been told they need to have a savings account, right? So 30 years down the road, you finally pay off your house. And you have $300,000, $400,000 sitting in your savings account. Go you. But then you look back at your life, at the 30 years that you spent paying down your house 1 month at a time, very slowly, and you say, had I taken that $300,000 and put it into my house 10 years ago, I could have had my house paid off 10 years ago and saved $45,000 of interest. That would have been cool. Why didn't I do that? And you look back and you realize that you were financially irresponsible to save $1,000 every month. Okay, so knowing that, now that I've told you that, you go, great, then I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put my money into my house, right? Scenario two, you decide to put all that money into your house. Every month, you shove $1,000 into your house. And guess what? I hope this doesn't come as a surprise to too many of you. You pay off your house a lot faster. The balance starts going down really fast, and you're like, this is cool. I'm going to own my house in 5, 6 years. And then you lose your job. If you have $0 in your savings account, how long can you go without a job before the bank starts asking for their money? Anybody? 0 to 3 months. Or, there's some really shady ways to skirt around it. You might get a year out of it. But usually not good, and even if you do, you're destroying your credit. You're making it so you can't buy other houses. I mean, a lot of bad things happen, but generally speaking, you can't really go 1 month without a job in this scenario. So that happens and you go, well, crap, now I was financially irresponsible to pay off my house. So neither of those strategies work when you try and do it all on that one strategy. Until today. Okay, you guys ready? This is the moment. This is a really big slide, the next one I'm going to show you. This teaches you how to do it. After this moment, you can leave. Like, you don't even have to be here after this. That's not true. I'm going to teach you a lot more. But this is how you do it, okay? You roll your entire mortgage into a home equity line of credit, which I will be referring to as a HELOC for the rest of this time because home equity line of credit is a lot longer than HELOC. I will point out that some banks, most notably Zion's Bank, will refer to this as a HECL, home equity credit line.
Okay, what?
Right? Come on, Zions, get it together. Okay, so you put your entire mortgage into a HELOC. Okay, so what does that mean? Let's say you have a house, and your house is worth $250,000. You looked on Zillow, and that's what Zillow says, and you believe Zillow because Zillow knows, right? Okay, so you ask your friendly real estate agent, and they pull comps on your house and give you a better idea. How about that instead? Okay. Or you sell your house, and then you know how much it's worth. Okay, so your house is worth $250,000, and you currently owe $200,000 on it. You've had it for a little bit, you've been paying it down, and I hope it's no surprise to you guys that when you buy a house and you get a 30-year mortgage, your first payments don't do anything to pay off your house, right? Does everyone know that? Is that new to anybody? Because if so, let's really address that. When you a traditional mortgage, what they call amortized, means that they've done the math to figure out how much you have to pay every single month so that at the end of 30 years, it's exactly paid off. It's really cool. They do some really fun math, but that's what amortized means. So in those first few years, you may pay $2,000 on your house, but only like $50 of that goes to the principal. The rest is interest. That's all interest that you're paying. It doesn't even pay off your house. You could sell your house a year later and still owe 99.5% of how much you bought it for. So this is a scenario where you've been paying it down for a little bit, or the market's gone up and now your house is worth more. So you take this $200,000 that you currently owe to your bank on a 30-year fixed mortgage and you say, you know what? I don't want that anymore. Now I want that in a HELOC. And you go to your credit union, you go to your bank and you say, hey, can you give me a HELOC for $200,000? And they go, well, do you have $200,000 of equity in your house right now? And you go, no, but you're going to pay it off for me. They'll do that. They'll just pay off your house for you and give you a HELOC for the remaining amount. So that's a whole strategy right there. That's what you have to do.
Say that again.
You put your entire fixed mortgage into a home equity line of credit. And now we're going to talk about how you do that because there's a lot that goes into it. But that is the basis. If you take one thing away, remember that. And from here, I'm going to try and make it simple, but it does kind of get complicated. Let's talk about the difference between a fixed mortgage, the 30-year fixed mortgage that we're all used to, and a HELOC. Because they're different loan products. They have very different ideas behind them. And let me just say this first, in case this is like, this, throughout this presentation, if this sounds weird to you, or like, who would do that, or why, let me just state that in Australia, they only do this. They don't have anything like a 30-year fixed mortgage. That seems bizarre to them. And when they move to the US and they have to go buy a house and they're told that their options are 30-year fixed mortgage, they're like, you want me to wait 30 years to pay off my house? That's ludicrous. So it's not that this is weird, it's just that it's weird to us in America. Okay, so a fixed loan has an amortized payment schedule. That means you are going to pay the exact same every month. Your payment doesn't change. If they told you your payment's going to be $1,500, it's going to be $1,500 every month. Now there are some weird fixed loans out there like with balloon payments. That's mostly a thing of the past. Maybe some of you guys still have those on your houses. We're not going to be talking about those today. Those are even worse than what we're talking about. Means you pay the same amount every month. And in the beginning of your loan, most of that payment is going towards interest. By the end of your loan, most of that is going towards principal. The last payment you make, only $25 of it is going to be interest, and the rest is going to be pure principal. It's a one-way street. They give you, in this case, $200,000, and you pay it off. When you give them that money, that payment each month, they don't give it back. You're not allowed to go, oh, hey, whoops, actually, I didn't want to pay you. Can I have that back? They don't do that. I've tried. Okay, I haven't tried. That'd be weird. Okay, next. They calculate the interest every month. If math is confusing to you, ignore this part, but for those of you who want to know, it's good to know. It's kind of good to know what they're doing behind the scenes on your interest. So when you get a loan, and it is a 4% interest rate, how does that determine how much interest you're paying? So they take that 4% and they times it by your balance. So again, $250,000 is how much your house is worth. And this is how much you owe. We're going to be using these numbers a lot, so get used to them. Okay, so they take that 4% and they multiply it by $200,000 because that's how much you owe, right? Can somebody do that for me? 800? 8,000? 8,000. I missed a zero in there. Is that right? Anyone want to double check that with the calculator? By the way, feel free to pull out your phones and get the calculator ready. We will be using it tonight. So $8,000 is how much interest they're going to charge you for a year. So divide that by 12. Someone want to do that for me? Someone with a calculator? I'm not pulling mine out. I'm making you guys do this stuff.
666.6.
I chose good numbers. So
There is a 7 in the
yeah, wherever you want it to be. So $666 of interest a month. That's how they calculate your interest in a traditional mortgage, just so you know. So that 4%, that's how they get from 4% to your actual interest each month. Okay? Okay. Depending on what kind of a mortgage product you get, and depending on how much you put down, you may be paying PMI, which stands for mortgage insurance. Private mortgage insurance, thank you. It really just stands for mortgage insurance. There's no need for the private. They could have just called it MI. So that is like, could be an extra $100, $200, $300 on top of your mortgage that you have to pay each month. And that doesn't do anything. That doesn't do crap for you.
It does for the bank.
It does for the bank, and it does for the government. That's good for them. They need it because, unfortunately, not everyone's honest, and some people don't pay their mortgages. So it's a necessary evil, but when you're the one paying it and you are an honest person, that never does anything for you. That's just money that you're throwing away each month until you can get rid of it. And, right? And then something that you need to pay attention to is that part of your payment you make each month in a fixed mortgage goes to what they call an escrow account, some magical account where they hold that money and then they pay your taxes each year. So you don't have to worry about that, which is kind of nice, right? Hassle-free, you don't have to worry about how much you have to pay in property taxes each year. And it goes towards a few other things, but we're not really worried about that right now. My wife can correct me if she cares. Now let's compare that to a HELOC. A HELOC, not always, but you can usually find, in fact you should find, and I'm going to recommend that you do this, HELOCs that are interest-only payments. Meaning that $666 that we just calculated, that would be your only payment on a $250,000 house or a $200,000 house, whatever we did the numbers on. So your minimum payment each month, what the bank requires you to pay, is significantly lower. Now let me be clear, the strategy is not to pay that interest-only payment, because I don't know if you guys know how finances work, but if you pay an interest-only payment every month, you're never paying down your house. You will only pay interest for the rest of forever. You'll never pay any principal. That is not the strategy, but it's important, and we'll talk about why later. It is a two-way street. If I give the bank $2,000 as a payment this month, and next month I go, you know what, I need $1,000 back. I can pull it out whenever I want. In fact, for a HELOC, they'll give you a checkbook, a debit card, and if you bank at whatever financial institution you have the HELOC through, you can just move money out of your HELOC to whatever account you want. It is, all intents and purposes, a checking account or a savings account. You just write a check right out of your HELOC account. You can't do that with your mortgage. They get mad at you, call you fraud. There's never any PMI on mortgage insurance, there's never any PMI on a HELOC. And then an important distinction that you'll need to know when you decide to use this strategy in your life is that you will be responsible for your escrow accounts, for your taxes. So each month or each year, sometime in August, is that when they like it usually? Might be different. In November, yeah. In November, you'll have to go and pay your property taxes and other escrow accounts. So that's important to calculate in there. Okay. Any questions on the difference between a HELOC and a fixed mortgage? Does this make sense to you guys? So why do we care? primarily the biggest, there's so much working for you when you're in a HELOC versus a mortgage that we're going to be talking about tonight. But the number one most powerful driving force behind this strategy is this right here. It is a two-way street. Now, if you guys are kind of following what I'm saying and it's not too terribly cloudy and confusing, you might already see where we're going with this. That means you can put all of your money that you make, whether it be from a job, whether it be from a real estate transaction, whether it be birthday money or you did a side job, whatever, goes into your HELOC. It goes into your house, all of it. Is it hard to see why that would pay off your house a lot faster? You're putting all of your money into your HELOC. It's going to pay it off pretty fast, right? But it's a two-way street, so then you can take money out of it. So back to our example where you make $2,000 a month, but you have $1,000 of living expenses. You put $2,000 in, and you just made a $2,000 payment on your house. And then over the course of the month, you're charging your debit card, and you're pulling out $50 here and a $20 here. And over the course of the month, you spend $1,000, but you still left $1,000 in that account. You just paid $1,000 off the principal of your house in 1 month. Which also means that as you're paying this down, you're putting all your extra money. In the beginning, remember those two scenarios we talked about? This is the scenario B, where you're pouring all your money into your house. But what would happen if you lost your job here? Well, you can pull money back out. That amount that you've paid down on your house is actually a savings account now. So it's both. You both are making a lot of progress, and you have that emergency fund in case you need it. But like most people who never end up using it, hopefully you never end up needing to pull back out of that account. It just keeps going down until you've paid off your house. Really stupid fast. In general, based on what I've read off of all of the various banks and credit unions' websites, you can get somewhere between a 2% and a 4.5% to 8% credit or interest rate. But we're going to talk about that in a second, and I'm going to give you a lot of examples because since I teach this a lot and since I'm kind of passionate about this strategy, a lot of my friends and family kind of come to me and ask me this, and about every week or every other week, I go and check like 19 different banks' websites and check what their interest rates are and what their programs consist of because I like to know. So when people come to me, I say, you should use MACU. You can get it with an average to excellent credit score. In fact, you may be able to, a lot of that is going to be dependent upon you contacting your banks and your credit unions and asking them. And I might preface with some bias here, contact your credit unions and ask them. For example, and again, I am not a mortgage person, lender, I cannot be quoting you this stuff. Mountain America Credit Union will go up to 100% loan to value ratio on virtually any amount of house, pending creditworthiness, and the interest rate goes up drastically. So to give you an idea, right now, yeah, if you're going up to 100% loan to value ratio, your interest rate's going to jump up. So to give you an idea, at 80%, you can get an interest rate of 4.25 right now at Mountain America Credit Union. At 89%, you can get 4.75. So that extra 9% barely changes your interest rate. But if you pass 89% and hit that 90% mark, 90% to 100%, you're going to be at 7.75% interest rate. Again, I can't quote you those interest rates, but that is what they have told me and is what is located on their website. For your exact interest rate, you'll have to ask them. And again, pending credit worthiness, like you said, the interest rate can go up a little bit depending on your credit score. Every bank, credit union that I have called that offers a HELOC in Utah, and I have tried to find every single one. So I think I've talked to almost every financial institution in Utah that can offer a HELOC, and all of them have said that you have to close in a traditional mortgage first, with the exception of Zions Bank. But again, there's some stipulations there, some that will immediately disqualify that as an option for most of us. And that is that, okay, I'm going to write this down because it's going to be numbers again. So at Zions Bank, you have to have an 80% loan to value ratio. So 80% LTV is how much they require. For anyone who doesn't know what that means you have to have 20% equity in your house. So if you have a house that's worth $100,000, you have to only owe $80,000, which means you have $20,000 of equity. Does that make sense to everyone? Does that confuse?
You're saying before they'll even give you a HELOC.
Yeah, and this is true of almost all financial institutions. 80% like Ben mentioned, is the kind of the standard. That's the ratio they like you to be at. Most credit unions, most banks want you to be at 80%. There are 3 or 4 that will let you go above that. They just have different regulations that go with that. So they want you to be at 80%. Okay, that's fine. That's like most other places. But they will only allow your initial draw, meaning how much you actually buy the house for, to be 75% of that number. This is closing on your house in HELOC. So if I want to go buy a property right now, and I go to Zions and say, hey, I'm going to buy this house. It costs $100,000. Will you give me a loan, but I don't want a 30-year fixed mortgage. Can you give me HELOC instead? They'll do it. But your initial draw, how much you buy the house for, or how much you pay off your current mortgage for, can only be 75% of that 80% loan-to-value ratio. Which, for anyone who knows math off the top of their head, means you have to come to the table with 40% down on that house. Now, after that, you'll get half of that 40% back in available credit limit. Like you can then turn around. So if we're using just $100,000, you have to come with $40,000 to the table. I'm going to box this off over here. You have to come with $40,000 down on a $100,000 house, but then immediately you could withdraw $20,000 after you close on that HELOC. But you have to have the 40% to start with. So that makes it a harder option for a lot of people. If you're in a situation where you have the available capital to be doing this, it's a great option because when you close on a HELOC, there's virtually no closing costs. Like you may, depending on who you talk to, may have to pay $500 to $600 in closing costs. And if you've ever bought a house, which hopefully a lot of you had because that's why we're here, or you're about to and you're researching it now, you usually pay several $1,000s in closing costs. You can refinance a HELOC at any time with minimal downsides. So depending on who you go with, they may require that you pay a $200 to $400 fee if you cancel your HELOC in the first 2 years. But let's say you go and you get a Mountain America Credit Union HELOC because you get to 11%. Or actually, let's use a more drastic example. Let's say you've only put 5% down. So you get it for 95% and your interest rate now is 7.5%. I can tell you for most of you, 7.5% is still, in a HELOC, is still gonna beat the crap out of 4% in a mortgage. And we're gonna talk about that in a second, but yeah, you're gonna be paying it off still significantly fast. So you get into that right now, and then 6 months down the road, you've now paid it off fast enough because you're using this strategy that now you're down to 20%. You can go back to Mountain America and say, hey, let's redo this into a normal HELOC where I'm only paying a 4.25% interest rate. And they'll do it. And in our experience, we've already done this once. We've refinanced our HELOC into another HELOC with the same bank, Mountain America Credit Union. When we did it, they didn't even make us pay the cancellation fee because it was still with them. And something I haven't even mentioned yet is Mountain America Credit Union gives you an introductory rate of 2.5% for the first 6 months. So at 6 months, we refinanced our house again and got another 6 months of 2.5%.
Cheater.
And they didn't even penalize us. They didn't even I thought it would be fair if they charged us the $250 fee and gave us the 6 months, or if they wouldn't give us the 6 months but not charge us the fee. But they gave us the best of both sides. I was like, you guys rock. I'll take that. Okay, interest rates. So with a home equity line of credit, your interest rate is primarily a variable interest rate, meaning it will go up with the market, it will go down with the market. To answer your question, yes, there are many financial institutions that offer fixed rates. You have to be careful. They'll call it a fixed rate home equity line of credit, and then you get it, and it turns out it was a loan, and they're not going to let you take any money back out of it. So anytime I've considered that with somebody, I'll say on the phone over and over again, now this is a line of credit, not a loan, right? I can pull money out of this. Oh yeah, you'll get a debit card. But there are some that offer a fixed interest rate. The caveat is that usually that interest rate, okay, I'm going to say some advanced things here that I'll try and explain as I go, but if I don't let this confuse everything else. This is kind of more advanced when we're talking about it. Your draw period on a home equity line of credit is how long you're allowed to take money out for. Generally speaking, it's a 10-year draw period. So for the first 10 years of your home equity line of credit, you can pull as much money out as you want. When you go to a fixed interest, I have found that usually they'll shorten that down to a 4-year draw period or something like that. And after that, it converts to a 15-year fixed mortgage. So you just have to be careful how you play with those and really make sure you understand what you're getting into. Because that's fine. A 4-year fixed rate, then you don't have to worry about the interest rate going up. And in 4 years, you refinance again. at whatever the rates are then. So you can definitely play that game. We haven't yet. One of the other things that we found is oftentimes your minimum payment changes. They'll have like a 1% minimum payment on that instead of an interest-only payment, which in this strategy, let me be clear, for this strategy to work, it does not have to be an interest-only payment. It could be a $3,000 payment on a $100,000 house every month, and the strategy will work. But for some of the more advanced things that this enables, which we're going to talk about like in the second to last slide, you want an interest-only payment. It helps with more advanced strategies. I want you all to either pull out a notebook, a phone, something, or if you have a good memory, I want you to think for a second. I'm going to give you some time. I want you to calculate your numbers here, because I'm going to start making you guys do math. So also get out your phone and open up a calculator. I'm going to start making you guys do math because I want you to see how this applies in your house. So I want you to go and calculate how much you earn each month as a household. I don't care how that comes in. I don't care if it's bi-weekly, semi-monthly, once a month. Just try and get an average for how much your household makes every single month. So the strategy that my wife and I use and that I would teach any one of you if you come and ask me, how should I do this, is one step further. Instead of charging everything with that little debit card they give you right out of your HELOC, you charge it on a credit card. Credit cards don't start charging you interest until the balance has been on the credit card for 30 days. Which means if you pay off your credit card once a month from your HELOC, then you're deferring how many days you have that interest building up in your HELOC. You're just going that many more days without the negative interest. So it's another advanced strategy. Not to mention, credit cards give you one thing that a HELOC doesn't. Points. Go get a points-bearing credit card. And then every time you swipe that, you're getting points, you're going on vacation for free, and you're saving yourself interest. Now again, that may only save you 50 to 60 bucks a month, but who wants an extra 50 bucks a month? Who's going to say no to that? Okay, so you guys got these kind of numbers in your head? You're coming up with 4 different numbers here. So you're going to have one for how much you make each month, one for how much you spend each month. This is basically how much you spend without your mortgage or your rent. Don't include that into this calculation because in our scenario, that's going somewhere else. I want you to know how much your house is currently worth. Hopefully you kind of have a general idea based on how long ago you bought it, and if not, you may want to pull out Zillow right now. I can tell you Zillow will be accurate to within like $500,000, so should be helpful.
I don't know about that. That's a pretty bold statement.
Unless any of you guys are in like a $3 million house, then it may be way off. The current amount you owe. So to me, that's pretty straightforward, but when I've taught this class, a lot of people get confused on this last number. They don't know what that means. And I'm not really 100% sure how to explain it any better. It is the amount that if you were to pay off your house today, you would have to give the bank. It's how much principal you owe right now. So if you bought a $250,000 house and you've paid $50,000 off, it's $200,000 is how much you currently owe. Okay, once you guys have those numbers, keep them in your head, write them down on paper, your phone, whatever, because I'm going to start making you guys do some math. It's so much fun. This is the exciting part to me. It should be, anyway. Okay, is everyone there? Does anyone need more time? Is anyone checking their bank accounts and mint.com and being like, I don't know how much we spend? If you don't know how much you spend right now, learn. Go home and start doing the math. Budget. If you're like me and you don't pay attention to that crap, get a significant other that can. Learn how much you spend each month. This strategy relies on you kind of keeping that consistent. I'm not going to tell you that you have to start saving money and you're not allowed to have any more fun, but I'm going to tell you that you shouldn't all of a sudden start spending twice as much as you were before you started the strategy. Unless you start making twice as much, then by all means. Okay? And if you don't know how to figure out how much you spend a month, there's tons of advice out there. Who's heard of the envelope system? Yeah, Dave Ramsey, yeah. You can use something like that. You can just write down every transaction. You can go check your bank account. If you have a checkbook still and you write checks, obviously you can check your checks. I don't like paper. Mint.com. Mint.com is what I would recommend, hands down. It is a free service provided by Intuit, who you guys might recognize as the people behind QuickBooks, Quicken, TurboTax. I mean, these guys know what they're doing when it comes to finances, and they provide a free service online at mint.com, M-I-N-T. I'm going to make tea out of some mint. My grandma used to do that for us. We'd go and pick mint leaves, and she'd make tea. Okay, Mint.com, you can attach that to all your bank accounts. You'll go in and you'll say, you know, I have a bank account with America First Credit Union. Here's my account number. Here's my password. It goes and attaches. You attach your mortgages, your bank accounts, everything. And then it will track every single transaction that you do. And then you open it up on your phone and you say, oh yeah, I spent $20 at Home Depot. That was for home repair. Whereas that $100 at Home Depot was for my business. And you can tag every transaction. You can set budgets. And then at the end of the month, you go, hey, how much did I spend on food this month? And then it knows. It just knows. It's awesome. I love Mint. Yeah, completely free. Because they're counting on selling you, like they'll advertise to you, be like, hey, you have this much extra money in your savings account. Why don't you get this high-yielding savings account from Bank of America? So they're trying to sell you. So they're getting their money from the banks to advertise to you credit cards and banking accounts. But you know, if they work, great. If they don't, ignore them. But Mint.com is awesome. So use that if you don't know. Okay, let's calculate your first month. This is so exciting. We're going to figure out how much you're going to pay off on your house in your very first month of doing this strategy. 1 month. And before we even start this, I want you to just think in your head, if you know, how much did you pay off on your house last year? Think that in your head, because we're going to compare those numbers. All of last year, how much did you pay off on your house versus how much you're going to pay off in your first month using this strategy? You guys ready? Who's ready for this? Who's excited for this part? I'm excited. You should be excited. You're going to need your phones. I don't see a lot of phones with calculators. You're going to need calculators. This is assuming you go to Mountain America Credit Union and get a mortgage and their introductory rate is 2.49 for the first 6 months. You may go somewhere else and get a different introductory rate. Utah Community Credit Union, UCCU, offers a 2% introductory rate for 9 months. Awesome program if you are a member there. You have to live in places we don't live. We're actually members at UCCU now because of that, but it didn't work out. Okay. I want you to take on your phone how much you currently owe on your mortgage. $100,000, $250,000, $800,000. I don't know what kind of houses you guys live in. I don't care. This is going to help everyone. Okay, type that into your phone. How much do you currently owe on your house? And multiply that by 0.0249. For those of you who don't know, that is 2.5%. So you type this in, multiply it by 0.0249, and the number you have on your calculator now is how much interest you're going to pay in a total year. Okay? Which doesn't really matter right now. We just need that number. Okay, so now take your yearly interest rate and divide it by 365. This is how they do it. Because that's how many days are in most years. Now the number on your phone, or if you guys brought a real calculator, like props to you, like I didn't even tell you needed to, so way to think ahead. The number on your phone now represents your daily interest. That's how much interest you accrue daily at that balance. So every day you hold that balance, you get that much more interest.
This is on the HELOC system.
This is on the HELOC system. This is how much you're going to pay off in your first month when you convert over to this system. Now, that number should be single to double digits. If you have a triple or quadruple digit number, you've done something wrong. Just want to be clear. I've gone through this with people and then they get to the end and I'm like, what? No, that doesn't work if you're typing in wrong numbers. Okay, now take that number and multiply it by 30. Because you don't care how much interest you spend in a day. You care how much you spend each month. Everything we do is based monthly. So multiply by 30 because that's kind of like an average days in a month. It could be 29, it could be 30. Okay. So the number you now have is your average monthly interest. It's not an exact number, but it's good enough to give you a... Okay, so save that number somewhere. If you have to write it down, if you know how to use the memory functions on your calculator, if you've ever learned that. I know most people don't know what the M buttons do. They're complicated. Yeah, if you're using your phone, usually it has like a great way where it just shows you what your number was so you don't have to worry. Awesome, I love phones. Okay. I don't know, they mentioned at the beginning that I like technology. I like technology. Okay, now, take your monthly income. Are you guys ready for this? So a new number, the monthly income. How much do you make a month? Type that into your phone.
So clear out the...
Yeah, so save that somewhere in your head, or write it down, or however you can save that somewhere. And now type in your monthly income. So in the scenarios I've been using, I keep spitting out the number 2,000 and 1,000. So $2,000 is monthly income minus your monthly living expenses. That's how much extra cash you have after you've spent what you have to spend in a month. Now, from that number, subtract the average monthly interest we just calculated. Okay, the number on your phone now is how much you pay off on your house in your very first month. Is anyone there yet? Anyone have their numbers? Does anyone have a good number? Anyone like their number that they're seeing? Is that a good number that you have? Does anyone want to share their number? How much are you going to pay off on your house in your first month? $3,200 and I didn't hear the rest, but $3,226 off her house in the first month. Is that good? Is that a better strategy? How many of you like that number more than what you're currently paying? I like my numbers better with this. Does that make sense how we got there? Did that make sense to everyone? And I've got some cool news for you. That number, barring your interest rate going up, that number is the lowest you will ever pay off on your house in a month. Every month it just gets better. Because now you've paid some off of your house, so there's less interest that they're charging you. So the next month you pay $20 more off on your house than you did the month before. And the next month you pay even more and more and more. Any HELOC that Mountain America Credit Union gives you, they give you a 2.5% introductory rate for the first 6 months. So going up to 100% where it will be 7.5%, if you refinance after 6 months, there's a potential strategy there because you're only paying 2.5 for the first 6 months. Now, let me be clear. I am not saying like go leverage yourself to the absolute breaking point. Still be smart about this. Play it right. You know, you have to weigh your risks in every investment that you're going to do. If you're going to be pulling money out of your HELOC to go invest on a property, play it smart. That is where the education that you can get for real estate investing is so crucial. You don't want to go make a stupid decision and lose all your money.
And these introductory rates, they can't stop doing them.
Yes, they can. So I asked them, like, are you still doing that? He said, yeah, I mean, I've been working here for 15 years and we've never not done that. Now, let me be clear. Every time you go to refinance, you have to qualify again. They're not just going to say, oh, you already have a HELOC here, let's redo it. You will have to requalify. So if your circumstances change and you no longer qualify to get a HELOC, you might be putting yourself in a risky predicament. But if you're it's one of those things, like any investment strategy, you really have to weigh the risks and know what you're doing. Education is key. Okay, so I built an Excel calculator. It is pretty rudimentary. There is much more advanced calculators and programs out there that people can charge you thousands of dollars to use. This one is free and it will do one basic thing. It will tell you how long you are going to take to pay off your house. Now, unfortunately, this isn't 6 of us sitting around on my couches in my front room where we're all hooked up to my Wi-Fi and I told you all to bring your laptops. So I decided to give you this link, write it down, or if you have like a cell phone that can download Excel files, feel free to go there sometime, download this file, and feel free to play with it. If you screw it up, re-download it. There's 2 ways I can do this. I can make up random numbers that I know will work and be fun, but aren't going to really jive with any of you guys. Or if any of you are brave enough to come up here and offer up your personal financial information in front of this entire room of strangers, we can actually do your scenario right here and right now to see when you'll pay off your house. Does anyone want to do that? Ben? Brave enough to come up here?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. Good. The left side is input. Let's put it that way. The right side is output. The right side is doing all kinds of fun equations to give you information. The left side is where you give it information. Now, some of these fields are set to calculate automatically for you. You can overwrite them if you want. If you screw up the calculator and it no longer works, feel free to download it again. Or hit Control-Z. Or just don't save it and reopen it. Really, whatever your level of tech savviness is, follow that path. Okay. Your current house value, Ben?
135.
135, presumably 1,000. Okay. Your current mortgage value, how much do you currently owe?
100.
100,000. Okay. Do you know how much your original mortgage value is for? Now, the following 4 fields are not necessary for the calculation to work. The only reason I'm asking for them is to compare how much interest you would pay in the HELOC strategy versus how much you'd pay on your traditional mortgage. That's really it. The numbers may not be perfect either. They're just a kind of a ballpark. Sorry, do you know how much your original mortgage?
I think it was 106, 108. I don't know. Do that.
Do you know what your interest rate is?
It's close to that, probably 4.5.
Okay. Presumably a 30-year mortgage.
Yeah.
Did you guys know you can get mortgages that aren't 30-year? That's just kind of standard. They'll do 15 and 20 and stuff like that, but don't do that. I know Dave Ramsey tells you to get a 15-year mortgage instead. He says you shouldn't get a house unless you can put 20% down and get a 15-year mortgage or something like that. I would say still get a 30-year mortgage and pay it as if it was a 15-year mortgage, but that's neither here nor there because you're going to use this strategy and this is way better anyway. Okay, how many months have you lived in the house?
3. Well,
2 years, but we just barely refinanced. So
Okay. Let's just stop and talk about that. Did you guys hear what he just said? So he's lived in the house for 2 years, but they just refinanced 3 months ago. When you refinance on a mortgage, what most people don't realize is you just reset your clock to 30 years. So you were 2 years into 30. Not that I'm criticizing you. This is what we all do. This is us as a nation. This is how we treat our mortgages. Then you go and you refinance, presumably because you want a lower payment, right?
and get the PMI off.
And, ooh, that's a very good reason to refinance. But to get the PMI off, usually you refinance and you also get a lower payment if you're doing it right. But even with a lower payment, 30 years to pay off your house. Okay? Okay, which, by the way, this number over here, that's how much interest you would have paid on your house in 30 years from now. So the house cost you $108,000, and you were about to pay $88,000 in interest.
Yeah, well, that's double.
Okay. And he's lucky. A lot of people have a number that is more than what their house cost in the first place. Okay. HELOC lending ratio. We're going to stick with 80%. We've already discussed, because you guys are super smart, about how there are banks like Mountain America Credit Union. I shouldn't call them a bank. That's unfair to them. There are financial institutions like Mountain America Credit Union that will give you 85, 90, 95, 100% loan-to-value ratio. We're just going to stick with 80 because that's your best interest rate. Deseret First Credit Union will go to up to 110% loan-to-value, but only up to $50,000 or something like that. You'd have to ask them for the specifics. Okay, which means the HELOC limit that they're willing to give you is $108,000.
Cool.
Your HELOC starting balance, so you're going to have a $108,000 limit, but you're only going to spend $100,000 out of that to pay off your current house, which means you already have an $8,000 savings account.
Sweet.
This start date right here is when you're going to close on your HELOC. You can put in whatever date really works for you. It is pre-programmed to automatically set it to the first day of the following month from whatever day you do this on. Just because I'm guessing no one here knows exactly what day they're going to close on their HELOC yet. Okay, we're going to assume you go to Mountain America Credit Union. Not that I am biasing you in any way. You ask all your banks and credit unions what they can do for you, and you figure out who's best and what works for you. But let's say you ask them all and you end up going to Mountain America Credit Union. You get a 2.5% rate for the first 6 months. Do you have all right credit?
Yeah,
Okay,
the best.
good. Then they're going to give you 4.25 after that. Oh, it doesn't matter anymore. Their floor thing is gone. No, maybe it's 3.75 now. I don't remember. Okay, and you only get that for 180 days. What is your monthly income, household income?
4,000.
Wow, I just
Good work.
retyped the same number. And how living expenses?
2,550.
He has all this math on here, guys. Like, he had to figure it out. That's cool. He actually calculated it. Okay. I should have hid that from you for the moment of grandness. What would you say about paying off your house in 6.2 years?
I love it.
Is that better than 30 years?
It's a lot better.
Now, if you care about the exact date, September 16th of 2022 is when you'll pay off your house.
Throw you a party.
And that is assuming you never make any more money. You stay right where you're at.
I like that.
Now, let's say you do. Let's say you go invest in some real estate, or you get a raise at your job. Do you have a job?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say your boss gives you a raise in a year. Okay. So, if you stick with your traditional mortgage, by the end of 30 years, and it will take 30 years to pay that off, you will have spent $87,000, nearly $88,000 in interest, or you could spend $12,000 over the next 6 years instead. Which would you rather do?
I think I'll go with the 12.
Cool, we have a winner. Everyone give Ben a round of applause. Thank you, Ben. When we talk about this, I want you guys to be very clear about what you're doing when you choose to follow this strategy. I want you to know what the risks are. In all of the time I've spent thinking about it, and maybe you guys can come up with more, I've only been able to identify 3 risks that come with this strategy. We're going to talk about those and how to mitigate each one of them, because the benefit to knowing what your risks are is you can figure out how to minimize those risks. Okay, risk number 1. It is a variable interest rate. This means the interest rate can, and let me be very clear about this, and will go up. It will not stay at 4.25% forever. In fact, they were supposed to raise it 2 more times this year alone. The nice thing is they're nice and they tell us that they're planning on doing that. It may happen sometimes without them planning on it. But let's give you a brief history of interest rates and how interest rates are even calculated and what to even look for. And this is going to get maybe a little bit complex. Everything I'm about to explain to you right now is not 100% necessary to being able to do this strategy. So if it gets too confusing for you, go ahead and go to your happy place for a few minutes and just omit that portion, okay? I'm going to try and make it simple. Although now I'm back into computer mode. Okay. When the market crashed in 2008, 2009, to try and help us out, the Fed set their interest rate as low as it can possibly go, which is 0. I'm not in drawing mode anymore, you guys. I should do that. Okay, so they set it to 0 to 0.25%. That is the lowest it can be. Now what this is this is the Fed rate. And the Fed rate is the rate at which banks loan to each other overnight. So when you give me a check and I go and cash it at my bank, and that money magically appears in my account, our 2 banks now have to go and talk that night and get together in this big huddle. And they send one of the representatives from each bank and they all get together in a big like scrum thing. And they say, okay, you know what, you had like 3 guys who owe us money, so you need to give us this much money, we need to give you this much money, and they all talk, all of the hundreds of thousands of banks out there. They all talk to each other and they basically transfer the money back and forth. They actually loan that money to each other overnight because it takes some time for them to actually transfer it to each other at this Fed rate. This rate is set by the Fed, and they monitor this rate very carefully and they use this rate to try and help the economy. So when the market crashed and things were pretty bad and nobody could buy houses, everyone had to sell and nobody could sell because nobody could buy, they set it as low as it could go to help people be able to afford housing. It made money cheap. This affects a rate called the prime rate, which is what we care about. We don't really actually care about the Fed rate. It's just to know how they get the prime rate. The prime rate is the Fed rate plus 3%. So at this time, the prime rate was 3.25. Now historically, pre-2008, pre-2009, that prime rate and the Fed rate changed weekly, daily, monthly. It changed all the time. There wasn't really a lot of rhyme or reason to us common folk. There was some really smart people behind the scenes who were analyzing the market every single day, trying to figure out what prime and Fed rate will help the economy the most. And it would change. And so when we talked about a variable interest rate, you were talking about something that every single month you might have a slightly different interest rate than the previous month. And that their interest rates, I mean, how many of you here bought houses or maybe had parents that bought houses or saw some friends and family buy houses when rates were like 15, 16, 17, 18%? I know my parents bought a house at that time. Pretty sure other people's did too. Not a great interest rate. On mortgage products, and let me be clear about something, a mortgage is any loan or debt that is leveraged against your house. So a HELOC is technically a mortgage. It's just not a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. It's a HELOC mortgage. Any mortgage, there is a federal guideline that says that interest rates on a mortgage can never exceed 18%. Because of crap that happened in the past. They came out and said, whoa, 26% is really high to charge someone on their house. So limit 18%, you can never go above that. Floor, 0 or 3.25%. That is kind of the range of how much of an interest rate you can have on your house. Since the crash, that rate has stayed at the absolute lowest it can until, does anybody know the answer to this? When did that rate first change?
6 months ago?
So about 6 months ago, 4 months ago, 4.5, 5 months ago. I think it was February. It was the first time they've changed that rate since 2008. And they changed the rate because eventually the interest rate has to go up a little bit to kind of spur the economy. It's great that we can all afford houses when money's dirt cheap down here, but to actually increase a whole lot of really complex finance. Let's not get into it, but the interest rate eventually will go up to help the economy grow. You may think, well, how does it help us? Advanced math, that's how.
Because science.
Because science. Science plus questions equals answers. Now, they've been telling us for 2.5, 3 years, we are going to raise the interest rate. It was supposed to be done in July of 2015, was when they were scheduled to raise the interest rate for the first time. And that time came, and who remembers a little mini crash sometime in July last year in the stock market? Because this rate was going to change, and that affects how people trade on the stock market, and so a lot of people did stuff, and so the stock market crashed. Just a little bit. I mean, it's not what we're talking about like 2008 crash, but it crashed a little bit. And they went, okay, maybe we're not ready for this. Remember, it is not in the Fed's best interest to jump the interest rate from 3.25 to 20% overnight. That is not going to help anyone. That will crash and tank the economy. They don't want to do that. Their goal, their entire job description is build the economy. So they're doing their best to figure out how they can do that. So they're like, we're going to raise it on this date. It came, they went, never mind, let's postpone until October. October came and went, and they went, I don't think the market's ready for it yet. The market was not where they wanted it to be at the time they were planning to raise it. But finally, in, I think it was February, March, can anyone, maybe some of you know more than me. I just remember watching it happen. They went, you know what? The economy's not quite where we want it to be, but it's good enough. Let's go up a little bit. And they raised it by 0.25%. So it's already been raised once this year, and they said at that time, and we're going to try and raise it 2 more times this year. All of this is to tell you, your interest rate will go up. Now, how scared of that should you be? That depends on your numbers. I want to know at what interest rate, if you were to get a line of credit for that interest rate today and keep that interest rate for the rest of your loan, would these numbers no longer work for you? And people are generally speaking surprised. So do you mind if I use, you were the last one up here, do you mind if I use your thing and let's find your break-even point?
Okay.
So this is how it's done. I come in here. Okay. So at 18%, the maximum that interest can go, it would take him 23.6 years. Now that is not nearly as good as the 6.2 years we saw before, but it still beats 30 years. At 18%. At 18%, you're going to pay a lot of interest, but you're still going to pay off your house faster. Now, is 18% tomorrow and for the rest of 23 years reasonable? Is that going to happen? No. It is going to be 4.25%, maybe 4.75% for the next year or two. I'm not a fortune teller. I can't tell you exactly what it's going to be, but to the best of how I can analyze the market and the best of what the Fed will do, they're not going to jump it 10% overnight. It is going to gradually increase, and the longer you spend at a lower interest rate, the higher interest rate you can sustain later on, because you've paid down more of your house. When you only owe $20,000 on your house, who cares if it's 18, 20, 30%? It's nothing compared to when you owed $300,000 on your house. That is the federally mandated limit, the highest they can go. Now, if they're willing to give you a limit that's lower than that, good on them. In the HELOCs we have signed paperwork for so far, I have seen 18% on all of them. So that is the most you can do. Now, for some of you, you're going to hit this. I'm already on that, Celta. Okay, let's say it could go up to 25%. Notice when his numbers hit NA, 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 that means you never pay off your house. That's bad. That is how you find your break-even point. You keep going until those numbers and you go, okay, well then let's try 23 and 23. Okay, no, still bad. 21 and 21, still not good. 20 and 20, nope. 19 and 19, nope. Wow, like 18 is really like your magic number. Yeah. So don't go above 18%, Ben, and you'll be fine. So each one of you are going to be different. I have helped dozens of people run these numbers for them and find their break-even points. Some people have really tight numbers. Some people make $2,000 a month and they spend $1,800 a month. And for them, their limit is lower. It's like 8 or 9%. Most people that I have done, like 95% of the people I've run their numbers, their number is well over 10, 11, 12%. If it is higher than that, I'd say personally, now this is going to be up to each one of you individually, assess your risk. How likely do you think it is going to, it is that it will reach 10% in the next 2 years and stay that way for a long time? Not very. When you are looking for a HELOC product from a bank, I would highly recommend you find one who specifically says that their interest rate is based on prime. So they'll usually say something like, our interest rate is prime plus 0.5%. Or Mountain America Credit Union, it is prime plus 0. That is the interest rate. And they'll usually tell you that. And that's good for 2 reasons. One, it means they can't just change the interest rate because they feel like it. That puts the control of the interest rate in the hands of the Fed, who, remember, have a vested interest in not tanking the economy. So it makes it so that your interest rate isn't going to go up, whereas, for example, America First Credit Union, their interest rate is not based on prime. Now, I'm sure internally on the back end of their systems, it is, because the interest rate that they're getting loan money from other banks affects how much they're willing to loan money out to us at. But their interest rate isn't directly tied to prime, which means they could choose to go up to 10% tomorrow with no forewarning. They could just say, you know what, we feel like 10%. They're probably not going to, but they could, and I don't like that. And 2, if the market gets so bad, or if interest rates hit 18% again, that's pretty indicative of a pretty crappy or a really great market, depending on how you look at it. And that means everyone's suffering, and it doesn't really matter who or where you are and what position or what strategy you're using, you're going to be hurting. So risk number 2 is the housing market. Housing market is your second risk. Say you get your HELOC done right now, they appraise your house and they say your house is worth $300,000. They give you a HELOC based on that. And then a year from now, the market absolutely tanks worse than in 2009 and your house becomes worth half of what it's worth right now. Say it's worth $150,000, but you still owe them $200,000. They can come back and say, you owe us the difference right now. We're only willing to give you a line of credit for $50,000 or $150,000, but you currently have a line of credit out for $200,000. Pay us the other $50,000 now. That is a potential risk. The housing market is pretty strong right now. It's on the increase, and it may maintain that for another year or so. No one can really know the future. But when it corrects, it will correct. It won't crash. What we saw in 2009 and 2008, I think it's hard because to all of us, it's very fresh in our minds what happened in 2008, 2009. But we have to remember, that is the first and only time that has happened in 150, 250 years of market history. Even the Great Depression didn't crash the housing market like what we saw in 2008. That was a fairly unique circumstance. And because we are smart human beings, or at least we try to be, we do our best. We're good sometimes. We came up with a lot of rules and regulations to prevent that from happening again. Now, who's to say that something else couldn't cause another crash like that? It could. It's possible. But at least now we've learned at least something from our mistakes and gone, let's try not to repeat that again. So the chance of the housing market crashing like it did in 2008, anytime in the next 20 years that most of us are going to pay off our house in this strategy, I say is rare or is not very likely. You guys can assess that on your own. Number 3, personal financial responsibility. That is the third risk here. If you adopt this strategy and you all of a sudden have $50,000 of available credit on your HELOC, and you go, you know what, cool, I'm going to go buy a boat and some four-wheelers and a new Tesla, and you go and you spend all that money on random crap that doesn't make you money, you will never pay off your house. And you will hit the end of your 10-year draw period, and they will convert it over to a 15-year fixed mortgage, and you will end up with a $3,000 payment that you can't afford, and they will foreclose on everything you own. Do not do that. Be responsible. If you are thinking about adopting this strategy in your life, which I sincerely hope that all of you are, you need to ask yourself, am I financially responsible enough to not spend all of my money when I have excess money sitting in my bank account? There are friends that we have considered teaching the strategy to that we seriously stopped and asked each other, should we? Do we really want to give them that kind of power over their finances? I mean, they could end up like in a really bad position because we know that they're just going to go not do it wisely. So yes, if your expenses increase drastically without your income increasing to match, this may not work for you, but neither would a fixed mortgage. I had somebody call me, one of our leaders in Chicago called me up and said, hey, I have this person who wants to know more about the HELOC strategy. I know you've been teaching it. Would you mind coaching them on it? So they called me up. I presented to them almost everything I presented to you guys today. And then I ran their numbers. They gave me their numbers, and we got to the very bottom of that Excel calculator. You know, I'm like, okay, yeah, they have some good numbers here. And we get to the bottom, and I say, okay, how much do you make in a month? And they said $2,000. Okay, and how much are your living expenses a month? $5,000. Okay, well, I'm not even going to type that in. I can tell you right now that's not going to work. Like, you have to have at least a balance. $0 balance would be good. Negative is not good. But again, it's not good for a mortgage either. You can't make a mortgage payment on that either, at least not for very long. Okay, is that clear to everyone? Do not take this money and spend it on toys. I mean, okay, you know what's really cool about this strategy, and this is in a later slide, but we're going to talk about it right now, is it puts you in control of your finances. You go, you know what, I could buy that $1,000 item I want, or, I was told to use the word doodad. Buy that $1,000 doodad I want. But if I do, what are the consequences? And is it worth it to me? If it's a $1,000 doodad that I was like, it'd kind of be nice. But it's going to push me a year back in paying off my mortgage, not worth it. Or if it's like, yeah, I really want that, and a year is totally worth it. You are now in control of making those kinds of decisions instead of just being like, I don't know what's going on. I'm just going to keep paying my mortgage payment and spend the rest of it on whatever I want. If you are in a situation where you do not make a fixed amount every single month, it's not the same. It changes month to month or time to time. For example, commission-based jobs where it really depends on how much you sell in a month, and there's going to be good months, there's going to be bad months, or a job where you work more in the summer and so you get paid more in the summer versus in the winter. A school teacher, although they get paid, I mean, they split it up and they continue to pay them throughout the year anyway. If you were in a job like that, this strategy really shines because it gives you the flexibility to, I'm trying to think what the best way to describe how it works is, but it gives you the flexibility to not worry about when the money's coming in and just know that it is coming in. So for example, how many of you have noticed, and we're going to talk about jobs where you make 2 paychecks a month and it's the same amount every month. How many of you notice that that first paycheck lines up with when all your bills are due, and all of that paycheck ends up going to paying off bills, and then the second paycheck comes in and you don't have any bills to pay with that, so you're like, I got all this money to buy clothes with. How many of you have seen that situation play out in your lives? It happens because of the way that bills are done and the fact that we get paid twice a month, but we're only billed once a month for most of the stuff we do. In this strategy, it doesn't matter what part of the month it comes in at. Now, the sooner that money comes in, the better for reducing your interest. But if, this month you only make $2,000 and the next month you make $3,000, it's fine. It's going to be flexible and it's going to work with you on that. Let me ask you, how many of you guys currently in your current strategy save money? Don't be shy. Good for you. How much are you trying to save up? Does anyone have like a good solid number? How much are you trying to save up? 10%, that's a good number. Of what? Okay, 10% of how much you make in a year? Or Or is just 10% every month of whatever you make goes into savings? Okay, when are you going to stop saving that? When will that 10% stop going into your savings account? Good answer. How many of you are finding it hard to answer those questions? Even though you're financially responsible and you're saving money, you're like, good question. When do I stop putting 10% of every paycheck into my savings account? At what number is big enough? Is 10,000 good enough? Is 20,000 good enough? 100,000? 200,000? What is enough? It's some random arbitrary number that you're working up to, some mystical, magical number. Here, you have a very definite goal. I am paying off my house. All my money is going to paying off this house. I have $200,000 left until my house is paid off. Let's work on that. Savings accounts don't work on us as humans because psychologically it's just a really weird concept for us to grasp. I don't know, I'm saving up to some number that will hopefully be enough in case I lose my job. Whereas saving down to zero, you have a goal. And then, once you hit zero, who cares? It's all profit after that. It doesn't matter how much you make. Yeah, I can make $1 million. I don't care, whatever. And if you're doing it right and okay, we'll talk about that later. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Okay. We talked about how a HELOC is a better mortgage account than a traditional fixed mortgage, right? Would you guys all agree at this point that it's probably a better mortgage account than your fixed mortgage? Let's talk about it as your savings account. I mentioned earlier, the difference between your credit limit and how much you currently owe is now your savings account. Now that may, if you guys have any financial responsibility in your bones, you may feel this internal resistance that like, no, what I owe on my house isn't a savings account. I can't pull out against my house. If I have to pull out against my house, that's going backwards, right? Anyone feeling that? Good. It's a good way to think. But let me put it this way. In a traditional mortgage scenario where you're saving X amount of dollars on your house, if in a year you were going to pay off $2,000, $3,000 on your house, but with the HELOC you pay, sorry, I'm saying numbers again without writing them down. I'm just going to write them so you can see them. Oh, I have to go back into pen mode. Okay, so in a traditional, oh, hey, look, I already have traditional HELOC written. You have $3,000 that you paid down on your house in a year, right? In the HELOC, you paid off, I don't know, this really depends on every one of your scenarios. Let's say you managed to pay off $25,000 in a year, right? Which is crazy, but totally not unrealistic with this strategy, and that's what's so awesome. We did 40 in our first year of this strategy. Pretty cool. The difference between those two numbers is how much you can pull out of that savings account and be no worse off than if you had stayed with your mortgage. Does that make sense? At year one, you can pull out $22,000 with completely made up numbers and still be in the same position or better than you were with your traditional mortgage. So that is a $22,000 savings account. Now, hopefully you never have to use that. Hopefully it just continues to pay off your house faster. And if you have to use it, hopefully you never have to use more than that $22,000. But now let's run through some scenarios. Okay, we're going to compare a traditional savings account versus a HELOC savings account. In a traditional savings account, let's say you save $10,000 in a year. Good for you. Okay, your living expenses are $2,500 a month, and you have a house payment of $1,500 a month. Okay? And you lose your job. How long do you go before you run out of money and can no longer make your house payment? 2.5 months, 3 months if you're rounding up. Okay? Same exact scenario. So time till broke, 2.5 months. Same exact scenario. You save $10,000 inside of your HELOC. Now, let's be realistic. You're going to save more than that faster than you would in traditional savings. But let's say dime for dime, you manage to save the same amount of money. You save $10,000 in your savings account. Again, you have living expenses of $2,500, but now, thanks to that interest-only payment, or actually it doesn't even matter if it's interest-only payment, thanks to your interest being calculated differently, your house payment is $500. That's how much interest they're going to charge you. Again, made up numbers. These are pretty average. That's why I picked these numbers. They're kind of average of what I see a lot of houses at. Now, how long does that $10,000 last you? 3.3 months. The same amount of money lasts you longer in a HELOC than it would in a traditional savings because you don't have that amortized payment. You don't have to pay that full mortgage payment. You can only pay the interest for a few months while you get back on your feet. Now, granted, if you're only paying that interest, you're not going to pay off your house. But when you just lost your job and other really bad things happened in your life, this lets you last and live longer before you have to short sell or foreclose on your house. This gives you an entire extra month. So it is a better savings account than a traditional savings account. This will last you longer because you'll grow your savings account faster than you ever could with a traditional savings because you're not competing. You're not debating whether you put your money in your house or in your savings. You're doing both. 2, your savings is just going to be bigger because it's growing faster. Instead of 10,000, you'll likely have 20,000 at the same time that you would have 10,000 in traditional savings. And the same amount, dime for dime, it lasts you longer. And hopefully you never have to use that. For most of us, hopefully that's the case. And if you do, it's for a month or two. And you get a new job, you get back on your feet, you find a new way to bring income in for your family. How does this affect your risk of getting foreclosed upon? It makes it less likely because you will be able to survive longer and continue making your payments. And by the way, okay, so you may, I don't know, maybe not, it's getting a little late. I've been talking for a really long time. You guys are probably like, just stop talking. But maybe you didn't even think about this. How do you make that payment then? How do you pay all of those expenses if you have no money coming in? It is a revolving account. You can pull $10,000 out of your HELOC and the next day put $10,000 back into your HELOC and you just made a $10,000 payment. And you got charged interest for one day on $10,000. Feel free to use the equation I taught you earlier to figure out how much that was. So you paid like $10 to borrow, or to not even borrow, you paid $10 to save your butt. Like, okay. Some extra bonuses to this strategy. Someone asked earlier, could I like roll my car in or something? Debt consolidation. If you have the available credit limit in, go ahead and roll the rest of your debt into this. Your car, just own your car flat out. If you have some student loans still, just if you have the available credit limit and you've analyzed the risks, put it in here because then you can focus on paying off one thing and paying it off fast. And everything else just goes away. And I don't know if you guys feel this way, but having 5 different loans and credit cards that you're trying to manage and pay off all the time gets a little stressful. Like, when am I making my payments? How much? Oh my gosh, I just owe so much money on all these different things. Having just one thing that you are working to zero is very liberating. And it's liberating for more reasons than that. How many of you have ever had a loan on a car and then tried to buy a new car with a loan and sell that car that you had that had a loan on it? It's kind of complicated because your bank isn't willing to give up the rights to that car until they get their money, but the next bank that's giving you the money isn't willing to give you the money until they own that car. So they'll make you like meet at the bank and like meet at both banks and the bankers have to meet. It's complicated, right? Well, if you own your car outright and you have the title in your hands because you rolled that debt into your house, then you just go buy a car, pay cash out of your HELOC, then at your own leisurely time, sell your car and put that money back into your HELOC. Just things like that. It just simplifies your life when you're not tied to all of these random debts and loans. Okay, daily interest calculation. Matt mentioned this earlier. Because you are getting charged interest daily, that just helps you out along the way. It just makes it even that much better, but it lets you do some slightly more advanced strategies, like using a credit card to buy everything and then paying off the credit card once a month. Because then you save anywhere from 30 to 1 day of interest being charged against that balance. So if I go pay $1,000 on my credit card, that's $1,000 that I don't have to pay interest on for anywhere between 30 and 1 days, depending on which part of the month I did it in. Does that make sense to everyone?
Plus points.
Plus points. Travel for free, guys. Vacation. Come on, don't pay for your vacations. And then when you're on those vacations, have a business and it's a tax write-off, and really don't pay for your vacations. Okay, low minimum payment. This is where we start getting into some of the investor stuff. Remember at the very beginning, I showed you 3 things you do when you're smart with your money. You save, you pay off your house, and you invest. We haven't even really talked about the investing. Some people have asked some cool questions that have to do with it. Low minimum payment. Why is that important? If I can pull out $10,000 and put it back in and make my payment every month, who cares? This is important because if you've ever tried qualifying for a traditional loan, one of the things they care about is how much do you currently have to pay on all your other payments. When I tell them I have a $350,000 house that my minimum payment is $400 on, or I don't even tell them that, they pull my credit and see that and they go, wait, is this loan attached to that house? How do you have a $350,000 house and your minimum payment is $400? It makes... It's almost exactly what I said when they asked me that question. It makes it easier to qualify for more properties. Now, I work at a company called Renatus, for those of you who are not quite aware of that yet, and we sell real estate investment education. We teach people how to invest in real estate. We have a lot of cool strategies that don't involve getting traditional mortgages. But you can still buy houses with traditional mortgages. And this helps you qualify for those traditional mortgages easier. Some investment properties, for example, depending on the loan product and who your lender is and all this stuff, they require reserves. So this helps when you're calculating your debt to income ratio. Large capital for reserves or down payments. We just talked about this. So not only do you have a lower minimum payment, you now have capital. I have a house that's worth $450,000 or $550, whatever you told me. You could take that money if you wanted. Now, every single person needs to evaluate the risk of investing. You could take that money, take $40,000 out, and put it as a down payment on investment property, rent out that property and start making cash flow right now, which feeds back in and helps you pay off your house even faster. So forth and so on. Or you have enough, go buy a house outright in cash. Then it's raw, just total, all the rent that you come is basically now flowing into your HELOC. It opens up your strategy. It opens up your possibilities. It is one more avenue that you can use to invest in stuff. And, okay, so we kind of talked about that. If you go invest and you don't know what you're doing, you have a significantly higher chance of screwing up. So I only have $20,000 of equity in my house, so I pull out the $20,000 and put it on a house that I think is going to be great. I think I'm going to fix it up and flip it, but I didn't know how to do my numbers right, and I actually couldn't sell it for how much I put into it, and I take a loss. And it actually set me back in paying off my own house instead of pushing me forward. There is always risk in any investment, but when you're educated, that risk goes down drastically. So now, not only do you have capital for properties, you have capital for the education. You can now afford to go buy some good, solid education that will teach you how to do real estate investment and do it to the best of your ability and lower your risk as much as possible. And then, once you've taken that education and you've learned and you're ready to go out and do it, you have the capital to do real estate transactions, which we just talked about. You have some money to put down on a house or to buy a house outright if you have the right amount of capital. Or you can take some money, borrow it against your house for a little bit, do a fix and flip, and put more money back in. And in 2 months, you could have paid off. You're your own private hard money lender. A lower payment for qualifying for reserves, which we just spoke about. Earlier payoffs. The sooner you pay off a rental property, the more cash flow you make off that rental property, right? When you're making $1,200 in rent, but $1,000 of that is going towards your mortgage, you're only making $200 cash flow. Once it's paid off, $1,200 cash flow. $1,200 cash flow times 5 properties, $6,000. How many of you would be fine to make $6,000 a month without doing anything, and your house is completely paid off to boot? That's good enough for me. That's retirement for me. I don't need to save $200,000 or $2 million in a 401k. I just need 5 properties that cash flow $1,000 or more each and have them all paid off and have my house paid off. That's more than enough for what we need. If you cannot roll your entire house into a HELOC, that's what we're talking about today, is rolling it into a HELOC. That's the strategy I prefer. You can still do this strategy with a personal line of credit. You can go get a $15,000 personal line of credit from your bank and use that as your HELOC account. You put all your money into there and you pay everything out of there, including your mortgage. It is not as powerful, but it still works. It will still save you a lot of money and a lot of time on your house. But once you get your house down to that limit, whatever works for you, roll it all into a HELOC, and it will be even more powerful. We're done. Kind of. So what do you do next from here? You've heard about this cool strategy. Hopefully you're like, cool, let's do this. I'm going to go pay off my house in 6.2 years. Woo! Go start talking to your banks and credit unions. I highly recommend that you talk to several of them and ask them any or all of these. I would ask them all of this stuff. Figure out which one works for you. Personally, I have had a lot of success with Mountain America Credit Union. They have been great to work with in almost all of the times we worked with them. They have pretty good, pretty competitive rates for what's out there. They'll go to a really high loan-to-value ratio. It's kind of the best of all worlds. Next, pick one and apply for a first position HELOC. You go in there and you say, I want a home equity line of credit, and I want it to be first position. That means they're going to pay off your house. Now, when you say it like that, they'll probably say, oh, so you already have your house paid off? You go, no, you're going to pay it off for me. And they'll do that. When we first heard about the strategy, we thought that was going to be the hardest part. We thought convincing a bank to do that would be hard. No, they'll all do it. Start using that home equity line of credit and the available capital and minimum payments to invest. I don't care if it's in real estate or if you have some other kind of investment, but know what you're investing in. Learn about it. Get educated. Go invest wisely and use that to accelerate how fast you're paying off your house, and then pay off your house. And then retire, whatever that looks like for you. Okay, so that is it. I hope you guys learned something and it wasn't too terribly boring or long. I try to keep it short. We were going to do a Q&A period afterwards. You guys have asked a ton of questions, but still, if you guys have any further questions, now is the time. If you want to ask questions privately, I am sure I will be around for a little bit after this, so if you want to come find me. Plus then I can sick my wife on you, and she also is pretty good at answering questions. So, thank you.